Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm a second year historian at Jesus College, Oxford, and this is a video to give you a bit of information about the interview process. If you look online, you'll find a huge amount of information about how to tackle a physical interview and how to deal with that 30-minute segment during the interviews, but there's much less about what happens in the rest of the time when you're here. So I wanted to give you a video with a bit of background information to let you know exactly what to expect when you get to interviews. The first thing you're probably wondering is what happens in the interviews themselves. So an interview is usually about half an hour, maybe 20 minutes long. You'll probably have 2 or 3 during the time that you are at Oxford. And the content of them varies drastically depending on your subject, and even within your subject depending on which tutor you get. So there's almost no way that you can completely game the system and work out exactly what you're going to have to face. You might have problems to solve, you might have an extract to read, you might get asked questions about your personal statement, any written work that you've handed in, you might just get asked about your subject in general. So you really need to be going into the interviews more comfortable with your ability to speak and talk about your subject and yourself, and to problem solve than you are about being able to answer any specific questions. Usually, like I said, it will be 20 to 30 minutes. In that time you will sit with the tutors, maybe 1 or 2, but it could be up to maybe even 5. I had 5 in one of mine, and they will just go through the questions, talk to you a bit, ask you some things and get your ideas about questions or topics, and so really that half an hour is information for you to show who you are as a student. If you're interested about the specific content that will be in those or how to focus on that, then I would highly advise looking online. There's plenty of videos about what might happen on the Jesus channel. We've got some mock interviews so you can have a look. So there is plenty of advice out there about what will physically happen in the interviews themselves. Now that you're comfortable with the physical interview itself, the next question you'll have is, what happens in the small period of time around the interview? So how do you prepare for the interview and what happens in the specific process? So usually you will get given a timetable that tells you when your interviews are going to be, and I would advise that you arrive maybe 5-10 minutes before when your interview starts to make you prepared and so that you don't have to stress about getting lost. Usually interviews run over, the same as everything in schools and colleges runs over. When you have short meetings, that's usually the case. So be prepared for the fact that you might have to wait a little bit longer than you've intended to. Either wait outside and listen to see if there's anyone there, or quietly knock on the door to let them know that you've arrived and then wait outside. Either of the two is acceptable, although I usually just waited outside instead of interrupting them. In terms of what you wear something you're comfortable with. Smart is ideal, but you don't have to be wearing a 3-piece suit or a really fancy dress the whole time. You can go in smartish jeans and a shirt or a top that you're comfortable in, because the tutors aren't really too worried about what you're wearing as long as you're able to show your ideas and be comfortable during the process. Most interviews take place in tutors' rooms, so prepare yourself that there will be probably a desk, bookcases, there'll be probably 1 or 2 tutors in there, like I said before, and so it's quite an educational environment, but it's also quite a personal environment too, so they're kind of inviting you into where they work. So just be respectful, sit in whichever chair they tell you to sit in, and just try to relax as much as possible. Sometimes you might have pre-reading to do, so I as a historian had quite a lot of pre-reading. I had 2 interviews that had pre-reading. Turn up a little bit early, bring yourself some highlighters and a pen, and just read through at your own pace, and prepare yourself as best as possible. In that kind of small time around the interview, try not to stress too much, just think about what you're going to be doing, run through some questions in your head possibly if you're stressed, and remember that every single other person who's doing the interviews will be just as stressed as you are, and the tutors are entirely used to dealing with people who are a bit stressed or worried about the interviews. You're probably wondering where you would be staying during your interviews, because it is a 2 or 3 day process, which means that you can't just arrive and leave in the same day. And usually what happens is colleges will give you a room, and it might be a shared kind of bathroom situation, it might be en suite, but you will usually have your own bedroom at least, and that will be where you stay for the extended period of the interview process. Double check any information that you get given as soon as you possibly can, because the arrival times, the departures, everything like that will change from college to college, but across the board usually it is provided to you free. You should be able to stay there for the time of your interview, because they're asking you to come, and so as a result they usually, in almost all cases, pay for you to stay there. The same can be said for food. So usually you get your food provided. You can eat in hall, so you'll probably have a set time slot between when you can go to eat, so you can eat breakfast, lunch and dinner there, and I would highly advise going because that's a great way to meet people, and so a lot of your time will be spent in the college. So you might also be wondering, if the interviews are only half an hour to maybe an hour each, and you only have 2 or 3 in the entire time that you're there, what do you do for the rest of the time? And obviously, as well as eating and sleeping, you have plenty of time to make the most of being in Oxford. And I would say that the number one thing you need to make sure you do at interviews is enjoy them, because it's a really great opportunity to spend time in Oxford without having much pressure, and to meet other people. So most colleges have a junior common room, which is a small room where all undergraduate students are allowed to go, and those are usually open during the interview, so you can go and meet people. You can usually play games. They normally have some kind of TV for you to watch things, and they might even put on kind of evening activities for you. So when I went to interviews, there was a quiz I went to on the first night, and then it turns out that I'm now living in a flat with the people who I was in the quiz with on that first night. So you really can meet people who will be with you throughout your college experience if you do get accepted to Oxford. I would also suggest looking around Oxford itself. There are plenty of beautiful places to visit in the city. You can walk around, you can go and get yourself some food, and you can spend time with people that you've just met, or you can go on your own if you prefer doing that, and it's just a really great opportunity to see the city. Okay, so what is my biggest piece of advice for the interview process? I would say make the most of it and have fun. So obviously interviews can be a really stressful time, especially if you don't feel very prepared for them. But at the end of the day, the point of the interviews is to have an experience of being at Oxford. Whether you get accepted or not, you want to be able to look back at those few days and think about all of the kind of people you've met, all of the times that you had spent with people, and just an experience living in an Oxford college, because for some people who don't get accepted, it might be your only opportunity to do that. And even if it isn't your only opportunity to do that, it's a great opportunity to kind of get used to it and get your feet ready before you eventually end up getting accepted. And so making the most of the time that you have there, going out and seeing the city, meeting people, enjoying being in hall, enjoying even the interviews themselves, because a lot of the time people do enjoy the process of talking to tutors about topics that they're interested in for a couple of minutes. And so I would say just make the most of it. Try not to be stressed too much, because a lot of the time the interviews will be stressful for everyone, and you focusing too much on being underprepared will probably damage you more than it will help you. And try to remember that the tutors know that you're nervous. They've done this for years and years and years. They're very familiar with students who are stressed. They're very familiar with students who are worried, and they probably won't remember, because I know that my tutor, when I arrived at Oxford, said that he just didn't remember any of our interviews. He didn't remember what we'd done. And so at the end of the day, although the interview is important in that moment, don't stress too much about it, because there's so much more to the interview process and the entire Oxford experience as a whole. I hope this video was useful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you're interested in other elements of the application process, feel free to check out the other videos in this series. And for anybody who is applying to Oxford and doing their interviews, I wish you the best of luck.